Well, good morning or afternoon, evening, wherever you happen to be. This is Stephen J. Holiday, founder and presenter, IDM Ministries and Associations, where every day is a little more like heaven than the day before. Today I'm thinking about, I don't know quite why, I was driving down the road this morning, and it is a nice morning this morning where I am. And there's a guy in a nice looking shirt, seems like a nice guy, sitting on a bus stop bench waiting for the bus to arrive. And I'm thinking on a beautiful morning like this, on a Saturday morning actually, if I had my choice, what would I be doing? Probably not waiting on a bench for a bus. And all of a sudden I felt this tinge of gratitude for the occupation I have and the blessings I have. And I got to thinking probably the only difference between that guy and me certainly wouldn't be work ethic or probably intelligence. It was just the fact that I have an education. I was given the privilege of getting an education with parents that supported me and all of that. Education can open so many doors, and it reminded me of a story of a guy that I met at a conference that Alyssa and I were part of, and you get to talking to somebody and you just kind of hear their story. IDM stands for it doesn't matter. And when I would be in education or meeting with people or just talking, and people would say, you have a real weird way of looking at things. Where do you get this? What church do you go to? And I'd say, it doesn't matter. And that's the truth. And so when I'm talking to somebody, I'm just hearing their story. And there's this guy that's like doing this amazing stuff with technology. I asked him about it, and he shared that he'd always been into technology, that even in the day when we were using floppy disks and dial up and things, he just always had an affinity for this technological piece. He told me about a time when he was in high school and he met a gal from another country. She was like an exchange student or something, and he really fell for her, and he thought she was really serious about him. And the two of them were really tight all through his high school, last year or two of high school. And so the time came for her to move home, and he made clear, I'm all in. I'm serious about this whole thing, right? And she took it. She took it, but there was some cultural issues and stuff. He wasn't sure quite where she was and all that. And so she goes home, but he's serious, and this is back, years ago. Some of the travel restrictions are a lot less than they are now, probably, but somehow he gets himself on a plane and follows her home. Goes right up to her door, and it turns out her dad answers the door, and there's like a fiance already involved that was there from before she even came to the States. And so, ironically, that family helps him find a job teaching English to high-end corporate folks. This girl had come from across the world to be educated, and she came from good resources. And these good resources, when they found this kid, they felt bad for him and set him up with some employment, teaching like rich executives and high government people English. And he was really into technology at this time, and so there's a lot of things that even the English interpreters didn't know how to explain because they just didn't understand the technology, but he did. And so these high profile guys would bring this friend of mine in to do some tutorial lessons, and sometimes these would be 24 hours a day, around the clock, because when they had time, they'd bring him in, and as long as he was available and kept and answered his texts or his calls, and back then I think they were pagers, they'd snatch him up, and they'd send a limo in 15 minutes, and he's ready to do an hour and a half lesson because so and so had a flight cancel or something like that. While he was doing that, he had nowhere to live. Now, he was making serious money, but in that country, living expenses were just off the charts. So he found a place to stay. There was an upstairs apartment above an establishment. Now, he described that in this country, they have some shady boundaries. In this country, it would be not uncommon to go into a place and grab a sandwich and a soda and have somebody scantily clad come and be your server. At the same time, it wouldn't be uncommon, same exact place, to have somebody in the corner doing performances of the kind that you can imagine. And even if one of the waitresses or one of the performers wanted to make some sort of arrangement outside of that venue, well, that was a private transaction between individuals. So he would go downstairs and eat his lunch, check his messages, or do whatever he was doing down there in between being basically on call 24/7 anytime one of these executives would need his attention. And before long got out why he was there and who he was, what he was doing. And so pretty soon these gals would come up to him and ask him if they were to give him like $20, $30, could they spend their lunch hour or lunch half hour sitting at the table with him so that he could teach them a few phrases in English, or work with them in English so where they could get a little better at speaking English. And he basically said that these women knew that their ticket, or at least one major ticket, out of the lifestyle that they were in was to use that language of trade and commerce in the world, in the global economy. And that I was just struck that these girls who were in a life that I wouldn't wish on any daughter of mine would pull out of their tip money to pay this barely out of high school kid to teach them a few phrases in English before they have to get back to work. And it blew me away, because at the time I was working with young people that basically they'd given up on the system. In a lot of ways the system had given up on them, and you sometimes would have to really talk them into catching a vision for what education meant to them. And I would get it. I get it, because a lot of the times it meant nothing to them. It meant nothing to them. And if they're anything like me, as you get older, you start to value things that you didn't really think much of when you're in the middle of it. But in a world where we have to talk people, not just high school kids, we have to talk people into learning, into looking at other things, into broadening horizons and expanding. Think of those girls willing to give what little they had out of their grocery money to learn a skill, a language that would put them higher, bring them out, put them in a better place. If there are places where you're considering, I would encourage you to look into education, and that doesn't necessarily mean paying tuition. It doesn't even necessarily mean some sort of formal arrangement. There is so much available on your cell phone right now that you could take part in, and in a very short amount of time become practically an expert in any walk or any field. So I just encourage you, if you're thinking that way, if you'd like to communicate with me on other ideas or thoughts or questions, I'd be happy to look at that and tell you what I think. If you're thinking of a certain path or direction, again, we're so connected in this world, and so many people are there to do what they do and do what they do well. But if you do what you do and you do what you do well, you probably have a love for it and would love to talk to somebody who's thinking about getting into that field. Not everybody is altruistic, but most people are, if you express an interest in what they do. So whatever you're going through right now, I just want to pray for you real quick and then wish you a great day. Father, I thank you for the person that's watching on the other end of this feed. I don't know what they're going through. I don't know where their family is. I don't know where their finances are. I don't know where they're at in their education or any other area. But I do know who does. I do know that you know exactly who they are. And you're watching over them. And you have things to whisper into their spirit. There is nothing that they are facing. There's no circumstance, no decision, no question about which you do not have an opinion. So Lord, I just thank you for whoever happens to fall on this video. I thank you that you've got a vision and a plan for their life. Even when they don't, you do. And Lord, at whatever place education seems the only way out, Father, I ask you to give them a strategic approach to that they would study to show themselves approved, and that they'd find wisdom, insight, strange ideas that they shouldn't have come up on their own. And that you would break the cycle of poverty in their lives. There's nothing wrong with having a humble existence, but there is something wrong about being broke, about being broken. So Father, I just pray abundance over their lives, their families, their incomes. In Jesus' name. Freedom. Speak freedom. Now, if you've been following this and you've gotten some out of it, or if you have a question or a thought, or even if you want to tell me off, click on the links below for the comments, or find my website, or email me. We would love to hear from you, and just wish you a very fantastic day. Nothing but success. All right? Bye, everybody. Thanks.